Well, this is a daunting task, a great panel, and I appreciate the introductory remarks. I'll get to my punchline, which is a strong maybe in answer to the question. I think we can do it, but there are some hurdles in our way, not all of which, or many of which, in fact, are not necessarily in the control of government. So I want to share a couple of perspectives. The first of which, in terms of setting the stage, is this change is without a doubt disruptive and highly uncertain, and that goes beyond the issues of energy, environment, and economy by themselves. Citizens, activists, landowners, indigenous interests are all looking for a new way forward. Some of that is going to be very difficult and challenging for all of us and the systems to adapt to, but we must. And at the same time, the future that we hold, the great work that Jay mentioned in terms of reaching out and having over 300,000 people respond, that's great. And the future is confounding and not necessarily forecastable. So to Mike's point, and this diagram and the way forward, there are daunting tasks. This is a huge undertaking. The IEA forecasts that by 2040, we'll have 100 times more electric cars in the world, which is fantastic. I mean, isn't that great? And as if to come at it from a completely different space, at the same time, oil use will rise by 2040. So it's not surprising that the public gets confused, and there is a degree of consternation, which results in deepening the second point I want to make, which is I would use the word crisis in describing trust. And this isn't just about energy and environment. This is about how we are as citizens responding to the world around us. Globally, the Edelman Trust Barometer reveals annually an assessment of trust around the world. And if any of you have looked at that over the course of time, you will see that, unfortunately, the results are, to use their language, dismal. Though there's been a fall of trust, the majority of respondents have a complete lack of faith and belief in the overall system. And worse, concerns have now come to a point of erosion that they turn to fears. And in turning to fears, mass population reflects, or rather rejects, authority. You have 53% of the people polled globally believing that the system is failing them. You have the election, therefore, of people like Donald Trump. You have the fears causing people to be closed to new perspectives. And they're not listening to the fact-based arguments that we all grew up on, that we count on in sage wisdom going forward. Which brings me to the third point. Information is not symmetrical. So the decisions that are based on evidence are not always believed. That's a tough pill to swallow. I have put my entire career in this, and certainly working on the NV review panel, you know, we really felt this was crucial. But I think it needs to be said, rational is not a single truth. And if you're listening to Fox News every night versus CBC every night, if the algorithms that your search engine is giving you is feeding you a completely different universe of perspectives, it's not surprising that you end up with further consternation and degradation of trust. But I am an optimist, and recently, last year, serving on the NV Modernization Review panel, we heard that yes, pipeline projects, for example, are in the crosshairs. There is uncertain policy and vision. There is a crisis of confidence. But despite all those concerns, across this entire country, it was remarkable that most Canadians fervently believed that win-win solutions are possible. There is much common ground to build on. Trust and confidence is achievable. And there were a number of recommendations going into this very difficult work that Jay alluded to with regard to new regulatory frameworks. I won't get into that. And I'm sure that in the government's attempts to come to a hold on how to move forward, some recommendations from each of the panels that presented last year will or will not be adhered to. But essential point is, strong policy, ongoing dialogue, a depth of wisdom of where we're trying to go is going to be crucial. And that has to, and by necessity, will involve a real and substantial participation of Indigenous peoples and a better relationship with the whole. So I want to move now to 3 points in conclusion. The first is that we must think differently about what effective and efficient really means in decision making and in policy, in my opinion. We have to stop thinking about project reviews as something separate from a full life cycle understanding of where we're trying to go. That's going to require deeper relationships, things like synergy groups and external advisory panels, systems that can enable transparent third-party verification, independent sources of information that the public and decision makers and academics can draw on and trust. As was quoted from a U.S. senator some years ago, you're entitled to your own opinions, but you're not entitled to your own facts. And we really need to work harder at understanding that basis. The second point I want to refer to is innovation, which has been talked about already, but we cannot take this for granted. The only way through to an energy transition is through innovation, technological primarily, but also adaptive processes and how we think about things like mobility and heat. We cannot take for granted that if we put ourselves into a position of being technology takers from abroad, our trade surplus will vanish and we will be paying Canadian money to buy things from other people. The devastation to our economy and our ultimate lifestyle in that outcome is shocking and frightening. We also need to understand, and last time I looked at the numbers, that if you grew the clean tech sector in Canada by $4 billion every year, and you managed to hold on to that gain and build it again another $4 billion, and another $4 billion, and another $4 billion, which is almost unbelievable by the scale of our industries today. You would need to do that for 20 years, non-stop, to be able to replace the wealth and prosperity that the oil and gas industry gives to Canada today. Can it be done? I hope so. But are we going to have to be really intentional and aggressive about this? Yes. As good as the innovation agenda of the Government of Canada is today, and I applaud them for that. I'm Vice Chair in Alberta for the Emissions Reduction Alberta Corporation that invests our carbon tax. We have $2 billion worth of projects underway, all directed at reducing emissions. But the scale of the economic activity needed for Canada to be able to maintain strong healthcare and education is shocking. And I think we really need to put that on the table in the mix on this, because if we miss it and we're shy about innovation, we will fail. Third and final point, which is a point to each and every one of us as citizens, we must be prepared to lead. By that I mean we need courage, we need shared confidence, not mistrust and despair. We need to be probing and skeptical and involved, not closed and cynical, like the 54% of people who choose not to look at alternative perspectives. We need to come at it from an interest-based point of view, be curious, understand what's going on, not fixed positions, look at accommodation, not conflict, fair progress, don't allow paralysis. And finally, as I said under innovation, be intentional. We must be intentional, we cannot be complacent. I do believe that the Government of Canada and many other governments across this country are doing a good job of moving us in the right direction. And we're going to need to redouble efforts to be successful. So I'm looking forward to the discussion tomorrow very much, and thank you.